Checklist Statement Book authored by Atul Gawande. I do not know anything about you, but I hate it after I email a very important and forget to test for typos or hand a report back to a client and that I miss the damn page. I do not make these mistakes because of an absence of experience. I avoided making these mistakes many times before, except for some reason this point I forgot to test my work and I am afraid to sound like an amateur author. Atul Gawande hates these mistakes, which are avoidable, but his mistakes not only hurt his reputation, they will end people's lives. Gawande could be a surgeon, and when he performs simple tasks like forgetting to scrub his hands before surgery or forgetting to form sure that there's enough blood there, he's endangering the lives of his patients despite the progress in surgery. And also, the number of surgeries that are performed once a year is over 150,000 Americans die once a year during surgery. The author of the Gawande tool says research is advisable to form it clear that half the main deaths and complications during surgery are caused by preventable human errors like not washing your hands or not being sure that there's enough blood there before surgery, resulting in plenty of lives lost thanks to avoidable error within the operating theater. Only unacceptable. So Gawande kicked off to seek out an answer, researching other high-stakes professions that severely reduced human error and maintained a reputation for excellence despite working in a very risky and sophisticated environment as he sought. Interviewing leaders from the development and aviation industries rich in complexity and danger. But there are two industries where catastrophic events rarely happen. The development industry incorporates a construction failure rate of 0.00002%, meaning that just 1 in 50,000 buildings collapses partially or completely thanks to avoidable human error despite the complexity of the plane, except that the chances of being killed in a very single flight cigarette is 1 amongst 29 break 4 million. Both industries have a superb diary because they developed a habit of screening counseling before completing important tasks and making critical decisions. The development industry uses a checklist throughout the development process to make sure this work meets building standards. A structural engineer who has built many similar buildings and has taken into account a pacesetter in his craft continues to consult the checklist whenever he lays a foundation or starts construction on a replacement floor of a building. Despite many flights and thousands of hours of coaching, the veteran pilot still consults the checklist before making any major decisions. For instance, shortly after Captain Sully left LaGuardia Airport on the morning of January 15, 2009, he saw a flock of geese and lost both engines on his plane. Despite intense panic and pressure to form a fast decision, he and his assistant consulted a checklist before making their decision. After longing a checklist to accurately assess the case, he could confidently make the choice to land the plane within the Hudson River and save everyone on board. Both industries. It's an uncomfortable truth. Humans are flawed decision makers, and that we have unreliable memories, that we would know what's best, and that we may have extensive experience supporting us, but we'll always forget the insufficient details and miss the important steps. That Atul Gawande said for generations after the primary aviation checklist came into use. Emerging checklists seem to be able to defend even anyone with experience against failure and lots of more tasks than we've realized, as they supply a sort of cognitive network. They're afflicted with the mental flaws that everyone inherit, defects of memory, attention, and inclusion. Without checklists, builders and pilots wouldn't have the wonderful log that they had, nor would the final public. Don't trust them. That going back to checklists, regardless of how familiar they're with their jobs from their specialty, is what makes them responsible professionals. Atul Gawande took his findings from both areas and started preparing checklists for surgeons within the operating theater 3 months later. Of surgeons and nurses employing a checklist for every operation, major complications from avoidable human error decreased by 36%, and deaths decreased by 47%. To manually check each item. The things on the list were as simple as checking that the proper patients on the table and also the doctors and nurses had never skipped an item and delayed surgery until every item on the list had been checked. Like most of the people put by the doctors, he showed plenty of resistance to using the list. The review. They were sophisticated professionals on balance, but once they began to work out those affected and therefore the disasters that prevented them, they learned to adopt the checklists. The doctors were humbled to understand that despite their extensive training, An outsized number of surgeries were performed and high IQs, relatively speaking, they were still liable to forgetting the straightforward things and conducting joint checks. Now, you will not save lives, but you'll be able to develop a superb log of manufacturing high-quality work by developing the discipline to travel back to a checklist before releasing important projects or making critical decisions. Your checklist is bad, you'll resist using it, you may still issue bugs, and folks will doubt the professionalism of your business. For the way to create great checklists, and reliable, Let's Communicate expert checklist Boeing engineer Daniel Borman, the guy who makes checklists for a living. Dan identifies 4 ingredients for each useful item on the checklist. Beloved handy. The checklist incorporates a clear temporary stop at a specific point in time where he learned to prevent pauses and completes the checklist. For instance, I take advantage of a checklist when releasing a video on YouTube to verify that the video description is consistent, which the links are running, and pause point before I hit the post button on new video. Component number 2. There's a helpful checklist recommended Dan Berman in each chapter. The checklist are going to be but 60 seconds to finish for an extended period, and you'll resist doing it, otherwise you will start to require shortcuts to quickly create a checklist. You ought to aim for 5 to 9 killer items. The killer item is an item if you miss it'll make an impact of poor quality or it'll have a negative impact on someone else's living. Component number 3. A useful checklist could be a supplement to current knowledge and skill. The checklist shouldn't allow you to prevent your mind from completing a task, sort of a robot. Each item should be a brief and concise reminder method to trigger a well-known routine. And number 4. A useful checklist is field-tested and constantly updated. The checklist should be practical and supported actual experiences. If you're not, then you'll not trust them. The perfect checklist is formed from past failures and lessons learned, so if you develop the discipline for a well-prepared checklist consultation, you may find a checklist containing these 4 components before pressing submit on a crucial project or performing an interim decision task. You'll be able to reduce your anxiety and grow a reputation for issuing high-quality work. The discipline of employing a checklist indicates the difference between being an amateur and an expert, which was the message essential I collected from the checklist. Atul Gawande's Manifesto contains many great stories, for example the facility of the checklist. I highly recommend the book. Thanks for watching.